Hey everyone, Tyler Morganwall here, developer of Rayshader, Rayrender, and the Rayverse. And today I'm going to be walking you through one of the new features in Rayrender. So if you don't know, Rayrender is a path tracer in R. So it's an R package for 3D data visualization. And this update brings a cool new feature where you can actually fly around in real time your 3D scene. So let me give you a little demo to begin with. So first I'm going to use Rayshader to pull up a 3D ggplot, which I'm going to plot with the plot.gg function. This brings up an RGL window, and this window is interactive itself, but this isn't produced using the path tracing algorithm, which is what Rayrender uses to produce really high quality renderings. So we can see here, we can drag this around, zoom in, zoom out, go up, down, change the field of view, and just generally orbit around it. But what we can't do is fly through it, change the, what we can't do easily is fly through it or change the orbit point, or just do all of the other things we're kind of used to be able to do now with 3D movement. So up until now, the only real way to interact with Rayrender in a pseudo-interactive way would be to take this 3D model on the right and call this render high quality function. So what that would do is extract the camera position we have here on the right and then recreate the scene in Rayrender and then render it down here. So we see here, I also added a little background image just for lighting. But we see here we have the exact same view. So if I move this over here, we'll see it again. This will shift over. And this is just a hack to get some semblance of interactivity. So we'll take a render snapshot. And you see this is the exact same thing, but just with a higher quality lighting algorithm. So that's what existed until now. So let me switch over to the nice interface. So now what we have is something a lot cooler. We're going to see here a window pop up. And this window we see starts in the exact same spot, but we can use the W, A, S, D, and Q and Z keys to move around. So I started zooming out with S, zooming in with W, orbiting left with A, orbiting right with D. I can move up with Q and down with Z. So this is pretty cool. And we can see here we also have the very top. So this is an interactive preview, which even if you weren't using the interactivity feature, is actually just cool to see your render progress as time goes. So we have a little bar here at the top, a little red bar that indicates progress. And we can see the longer we go, the less noise appears on our image, and that's characteristic of the Monte Carlo rendering algorithm. So let's continue to move around. We can also click on a new focal point. So right now, if I zoom in, we can see I'm zooming in right in the center. But let's say I want to zoom in on a different area. So all I have to do is click, and now I'm orbiting around that point. So here you can see I can shift around, zoom in further, and let's say I want to then move to this peak over here. I just click on that, and now this is the new orbit point, so that's really cool. Now let's say I want to shift my view, but I don't want to permanently change the orbit point, so I can right-click, and now I can look around, but the camera is staying in the same position, and when I click one of the movement buttons now again, I will go back to looking at where my original viewpoint was, so that's really nice. So you might notice here that the movement's actually kind of slow, the update is kind of slow. It's about 1 frame per second. So if I want to quickly move through the scene, I can actually hit the F key, and this turns on the fast travel mode. So you can see here it renders a lower quality image, but it's much faster. So if you want to reposition the camera, it's a lot easier to do it with this mode on. So let's just demo that. Let's zoom over here, zoom in, and then we can turn it back off by hitting F again. And there is our higher quality render. So this is cool, but we're still in this orbiting travel mode. And what if we want to actually fly through our scene without just focusing on one point? To do that, we just have to hit the tab key, and that toggles orbit mode. So now we move around, and we are no longer constrained just to looking at that single. I went under the model. Now we're no longer constrained to orbiting, so we can strafe back and forth, move in and out. And if we want to lower the step size, we can control that too. We can hit the C key, and that makes our step size smaller. Or we can hit the E key, and that makes it much larger. So now if I zoom out, I'm going to zoom out very quickly. So there we have our entire scene, and I'll zoom back in. Let's say now I want to go back to the original view. I just have to click R, and that resets it back to the original view we had. So that's cool. So our camera actually has a lot of properties other than just position and where we're looking at. We also can change the field of view. To do that, I just have to click, and I'll go in a fast mode. Up and down changes the field of view. So if we want to have a very, very large field of view, which gives you sort of a wide angle lens, we can, let me turn orbit mode back on. We can stretch it out like that. So now you can see we have quite a lot of distortion, but a very high perspective effect. Or we can really compress the field of view by hitting the up key. And now we can see we have quite a flat field of view. So this sort of compresses everything down and removes a lot of the perspective from the shot. We can see here, yeah, we've lost a lot of the diverging perspective, but we also have to move much further away. Let me move this out, and there we go. So let me reset. And with path tracing, we also can control the aperture. So you can see that if you look at the background, we can see this is all very in focus. But let me zoom in and increase the aperture, and that will actually make things go out of focus, which you might ask yourself, like, why do you want something to go out of focus? And it's actually sometimes nice to be able to focus your viewer's attention on a specific feature in your 3D plot. So here I'm really making a shallow field of view, and let me move in closer. So let's say I wanted to focus on this particular distribution. Now by clicking on it and adjusting the field of view, everything else is out of focus, and this is now in focus. So now we've directed our viewers' attention to this specific distribution. So let me just rotate around this, and you can then find the perfect view. So something else you can do that, let's say we wanted to view it from this angle, but we didn't like how the sun looked from this particular position. It's kind of flat because the sun's directly on it. Well, with the 3 and 4 keys, we can actually adjust the environment light position. So we can see here we're actually controlling the position of the sun. So let's say I wanted a sort of side view like that, or I wanted to adjust it back, forth. And let me turn on fast mode just to show off. So you can see here we can shift it around, get the exact right view we want, and go back into our high quality render. We can also control the focal length with the 1 and 2 keys, although this is usually easier by clicking. But let me just show you what that does. So I'm going to hit 2, and we increase the step size. So you can see here now I'm focusing further back, and now I'm focusing on the peaks in the back. And I can then hit 1 to bring the focus back in closer. And you're pulling focus as the cinematography term. So you're adjusting the focal length in order to put what you want in focus in focus. So you can do that with the 1 and 2 keys. And let's say you want to actually save this camera position because you want to recreate this render later, maybe non-interactively. You can click the P key, and that tells you exactly where the camera is. So right now it's at 551.59, 79.87, and negative 293.16. And you're looking at these numbers here: field of view 1.1, aperture 20.2. You have your focal distance, and we have no environment rotation right now. So you can use these to recreate this image, which is really handy. So that's really cool. Now let's go to a different visualization. So I'm going to exit out of this by hitting the escape key. You can also just hit the X in the window. And when it's done, it'll print out the final frame to your device. So let's generate this Rayshader map. So I'm going to render this is a Monterey Bay. So this is interesting bathymetry off of the California coast. So we see here, we're zoomed out on the map. So I hit R and you can see we're all the way out there. So let's zoom in. And we can now orbit around. You know, this is let's say we want to focus in on this area down here. Now you can see here I tried to move forward, and in orbit mode, if you actually move forward too much and you would overstep the orbit, it'll actually stop you, which is kind of nice because sometimes you'll zoom in too much and you'll suddenly end up inside your object. So this prevents you from doing that. But you can see here we have this cool bathymetry in Monterey Bay where we have this underwater canyon. So let's zoom out. Let's turn on fast mode. And we can see we have our scale bar over here, and we have some mountains over here. So what I want to show you is something cool you can do with this interactive feature, which is create animations. So I'm going to save a couple keyframes, and to do that, I'm going to hit the K button. So when I hit the K button, it saves a keyframe, and I'm actually going to zoom in, and I'm going to save another keyframe here. And each time you hit the K button, what it's doing is it's saving that specific camera orientation, look at position, field of view, everything into a data frame in the background. And then you can use all of those to then create an animation using the render animation function in Rayrender. So let's say I want to then zoom into here. So I get real close. Let's say I take out the field of view a little bit. And then let's say I want to, so that's a little too much. Let's speed this up by going to the fast mode. So then I'll save that point. And let's go into orbit mode, or out of orbit mode, so I can zoom in and kind of fly through this freely. So then I'm going to save a keyframe here. I'm going to use the right key, which allows me just to change my look direction, which is nice when you're flying around. And I'm just going to fly through these mountains by saving a couple keyframes. So we're going to swoop through these mountains. And then we are going to zoom out again, and let's then finally return to hit reset, save one keyframe there, and then return to our final position. And now when I hit escape, it will actually save all of those keyframes to this get saved keyframes function. So if you call that, you can see we get all of our keyframes here. So let's we can use this return scene is equal to true to get our Rayrender scene from Rayshader, and then we can generate our camera motion using this function with passing in our keyframes. And here we have 60. Let's set that to 90 because I can speed this, or let's set it to 120. I can speed this up in post. And then finally, we can render the animation. Now, normally you'd want more samples than this, and you'd want to set a file name so it would actually save the frames. But here we're just going to set it to 1 because we can then preview our animation by going through it as quickly as possible. So let's try it and see what happens. And if you've enjoyed this tutorial so far, please consider liking and subscribing for more R and Rayverse content in the future. Thanks. And you can see here we're going through cubic transitions. So this is the tween is a cubic function that zooms through each one of those keyframes we saved. So here we're switching off orbit mode and we're going to fly through the mountains. And remember, this is all made interactively, so this is all super easy. There was no needing to use math to figure out where to point the camera or exactly what to look at. You could just use the K key and then save each one of these frames to move yourself through the scene. Super easy. No thinking required. So this is a really cool feature, and I hope you get a lot of cool stuff out of it. So if you create anything cool, be sure to post it to Twitter with the Rayrender hashtag, RStats hashtag, and DataViz hashtag, and I hope you can create some really cool stuff with this. All right, bye.